Alright, hello everyone, I am back once again, and in this video I'm going to be showcasing week 6 of the G7ML League. And as you can see, unfortunately the match is going to take place on Showdown. I believe the reason why this match was on Showdown as opposed to, in-game was because if you've watched my other previous videos, you'll notice that I've been having a lot of connection issues, and this week was no different, honestly. And I don't remember if the connection issues behind this match were on my end or my opponent's end or on both, but the bottom line was that we couldn't get the match going because, these disconnections were just starting to get on my nerves if my previous videos didn't make that obvious already. And as a result, I was just like, you know what, this was in a time when I was starting to get kind of hasty of just getting the season over with, honestly, since I wanted to focus more on getting Wi-Fi matches for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, as well as Sword and Shield up. But I needed to get this league finished, and as well as getting all of the matches recorded and whatnot. That's probably one of the reasons why I forgot about this, showcasing the matches for this league last year, because I was just way too preoccupied with the other leagues, honestly, or the other matches that I was doing for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, as well as Sword and Shield. But yeah, obviously draft leagues was another thing that had a lot to do with it. But yeah, so but yeah, here we are now, and I was like, I wasn't really on board with Showdown, but given that these connection issues were just kind of prevailing, I was just like, you know what, screw it, we're gonna do it on Showdown. But I just want to get this match over with. But anyways, so before we get into this match, obviously my opponent is gonna be a guy named Lars. It's not El Scissor, unfortunately, but it's gonna be another guy named Lars who represents the Termanitar team. He's another good player in his own right, obviously. His logo is also pretty spiffy if you actually look at it. It's actually one of the better logos I've ever seen, honestly, in the draft league community. But yeah, so my opponent's draft, if you want to see it, I mean, you already got a glimpse of it right here as well as mine's, but if you want to see the entire roster, here it is. Again, these are just glimpses, but I'm not going to really go over it, honestly, that much. Just know that it's pretty much busted, honestly. Like, there's a lot of things I don't like on this guy's team, honestly. And yeah, although it's not undoable, but this also kind of depends on how good this opponent is, honestly. His record may not be much, but he is supposedly one of the more tougher opponents in this league, actually. So yeah, I mean, we can never underestimate anyone when it comes to draft leagues, obviously. But yeah, so obviously this is the team that I have for him, obviously. It's going to consist of Milotic, obviously. It's going to have Roserade, Zeraora, Skarmory, Zygarde, and Mega Metagross. My opponent, obviously, though, I honestly couldn't tell you how I was supposed to prepare this match for this guy, because no matter what, he has Magearna and he has Rayquaza, and I feel like those two things alone can really just do my entire team in if he plays his cards correctly and has the right coverage, honestly. So yeah, I honestly wasn't really sure. Like, this was one of those teams that, while I did feel like it was doable, it was really just going to come down to how good my opponent was. If he knows how to play all of his cards correctly, I could be, I could be manhandled for all I know. But that's exactly what we're going to go over in this match right now. So without any further delays, let's get this show on the road, shall we? Okay, so I believe my opponent is actually going to lead off with the Magearna, and I lead off with the Milotic. Now here I figured, okay, what's it called? Milotic is a lot faster than Magearna, if the Magearna is not invested in any form of speed. And that was something I actually wanted to find out right out of the gate, which is why I went for the Scald right away. My opponent, annoyingly enough, is going to go for the Volt Switch, which means he's going to get to pivot into something. And because he was slower than Milotic, he gets to kind of like get the slow pivot, which would allow him to kind of pick whatever he wants and then continue repeating the process if he has another pivoter under his belt, which he does in the form of Mind Shell. And speaking of Mind Shell, this Mind Shell isn't going to do anything crazy. In fact, the only thing he's really going to do here, after I proc my Flame Orb, is go for a U-turn and then go into Rayquaza, which, yeah, this thing is the one thing I was already mentioning earlier, is going to be a threat. Now, unfortunately for me, at the time, I think I did underestimate this Rayquaza, and I was kind of hoping that it wouldn't have Thunderbolt. But I was also thinking, if it did have Thunderbolt, I wanted to believe that Milotic, in all its specially defensive glory, would definitely be able to take a Thunderbolt from Rayquaza. Although I don't think this Milotic was fully split def invested. I think it was only partially split def invested with a bit of physical investment for any physical attackers they may have, such as Weavile or the Hippowdon if he chooses to stay in on the Milotic and not get Scald burned, Unfortunately for me, after I go for the Scald, because of the pivot and whatnot, Here, he's gonna definitely reveal that, yeah, he does have the Thunderbolt, and it definitely takes out my Milotic, so yeah, that kind of blows, unfortunately. Now I have to send in Metagross here to go for the Ice Punch after Mega Evolving. Unfortunately, he's gonna Hard Switch into the Hippowdon, get the Sandstream going, and this Ice Punch doesn't really do too much. And on top of that, he has the Rocket Helmet, Rocky Helmet to actually punish my physical attackers for attacking and whatnot, the Hippowdon that is. So obviously because of that, I decided not to stay in any longer and just go into Skarmory and then start setting up some spikes, obviously. In the process, this Hippowdon is just going to go for the Slack Off and then switch immediately into the Latias. And with that, I'm going to hard switch into Zeraora because I actually was kind of fearing the Thunderbolt from this thing as well. Because, you know, I don't want to lose Skarmory just yet because he does have Defog options. I think Rayquaza and this Latias can actually definitely learn Defog. So I definitely don't want him to just, you know, take those out, honestly. So I needed to keep Skarmory alive for that, honestly, specifically. So I had to immediately switch into Zeraora. I was kind of hoping he would go for the Defog right away if he did have it on this Latias, but instead he's just going to go for the Shadow Ball. Thankfully it doesn't do too much though, because, you know, Latias is not really known for offensive prowess, honestly, but more so the defensive, honestly. Now here, my opponent is going to definitely switch out the Latias because he doesn't want to take a Outrage, obviously, and go straight into the Magearna. I actually kind of predicted this and just went for the knockoff just to see what item this thing had, and if he stayed in with the Latias, what item would that thing have? And yeah, but here I knock off the Magearna instead, and as you can see, it's definitely an Assault Vest, obviously. Now the Sandstorm is gone, so now I have to immediately switch into something else because I didn't want to get Fleur Cannon, honestly. So I hard switch into Roserade, which is kind of one of the only few things that on my team that can actually take a Fleur Cannon. And unfortunately for me, I don't know if my opponent was predicting me here, or if this was a middle ground play, like if he considered this to be a middle ground play, but he ended up going for the Ice Beam of all moves, and yeah, that did over half to Roserade. I was a little annoyed at this, so I stayed in and went for the Hidden Power Ground to see how much damage it did, and it did do a fair amount, honestly. But unfortunately it wasn't enough to take it out, which means that this thing is just going to go for another Ice Beam and take out my Roserade entirely, which really sucks. So because of that pivot that this guy, the two pivots that he did earlier in the match, he basically got to take out two of my mons without losing very much anything, honestly, which is kind of insane, honestly. It just goes to show you that my opponent was actually really, really good from the get-go, honestly. I kind of already knew this, but I kind of was like hoping that he would be susceptible to some mistakes, honestly. But so far he hasn't really shown that, honestly, which is kind of unfortunate for me, honestly. But yeah, anyways, here I'm going to send in the Zygarde now. Goal here is obviously just to go for the 1,000 arrows, and if he tries to switch anything in, it's not going to appreciate it. He does let this Magearna go down, thankfully. Now he's going to send in the Weavile, though. So obviously now I have to hard switch into Skarmory, which I think is kind of obvious. He's going to go for the Ice Punch. I was kind of expecting the Icicle Crash, I will admit. But yeah, Ice Punch is the option here. And I do get to punish him with my Rocky Helmet, which is good. But this is definitely going to force him to switch out, and he's going to go into Rayquaza. Me knowing this, I actually decided to just go for the Whirlwind and just pivot him into something else. Now here, I pivot him into Latias, which is... I thought it was good, because I thought I could actually just Whirlwind it again. But he ends up revealing the Defog as I went for another Whirlwind. And I was just like, oh damn it. But I did get him into this Hippowdon, which is the perfect opportunity for me to reapply the spikes here. And that's exactly what I do. The Sandstorm is back up, but a good chunk of my team doesn't really care about the Sandstorm right now. Metagross is a Steel type, so he doesn't care about Sandstorm. Skarmory is Steel type as well. The Zygarde is a Ground type, so the only thing that's really like worried about the Sandstorm is really the Zeraora, which isn't going to be out for very much of the match anyway, so yeah. But here we go. Here I brought in the Metagross again, just because I think here I actually think I predicted him to want to switch out after I set up the spikes or something. But yeah, I do you know, set it in regardless and whatnot. And he's gonna send in the Rayquaza. So this gave me the opportunity, because I actually was able to predict him here on this double switch. I was actually able to just get another free Ice Punch right here, and because this what's it called, Hippowdon took damage earlier. Now this Ice Punch, at the time I wasn't really sure if this was going to be a 2-hit KO, but you're going to see right here that it definitely was enough to take it out this time, which is good. It might have been based on a roll though, I'm not really sure. But for me, what mattered was that I took out the Hippowdon, because the Hippowdon was being kind of annoying, especially with that Sandstorm. But yeah, Now comes the Mine Shout. Now this thing, obviously my biggest concern with this thing is that it can have the high jump kick, honestly, but it can also pivot if he thinks I'm going to switch out into something, particularly Skarmory, because that's the only thing that can really take hits from Mine Shout at this point, and even then not well. It's probably just going to be for death fodder if anything, because high jump kick is a very powerful move, and Mine Shout is known for having very good attack stat, honestly. That with combined with high jump kick, it's just literally, you know, this thing's like a powerhouse of a mon, basically. I ended up switching into the Zygarde instead, turns out, so yeah, that's kind of crazy that I sent this in. I guess I was to an extent underestimating the Mine Shout, or maybe it was expecting the U-turn, I'm not really sure though. But looking at my team, I think it just made too much sense to go for the high jump kick just to literally cripple any switch-ins should I switch anything out, obviously. But yeah, so here unfortunately, yeah, this high jump kick is a 2-hit KO, so instead of going for the 1000 arrows, which is kind of what I was hoping I could do, I have no choice but to just go for the E-speed and hope for a crit. I think even with the crit, it would have probably still lived on a smidgen, but it would have probably allowed for my Metagross to finish it off. Which, speaking of which, I could do, but unfortunately this guy's gonna be savvy enough to just switch out immediately. I do get a crit with this Bullet Punch, which, for whatever it's worth, because it doesn't really do me anything. He's gonna send out this Latias specifically to fog all the hazards, which is kind of good because this also gets rid of the rocks that he got up earlier with the Hippodon. So yeah, but here I'm just gonna go for the Iron Head. Now here I think I could have just kept on going for the Whirlwind in hopes of getting the Weavile in, honestly, and possibly set up another layer of spikes. But I think here I'll admit that because of how my opponent was just outplaying the hell out of me for the most part, I think I was just starting to kind of like give up here, honestly, and was just like starting to lose my patience, and I just wanted to start attacking his team because that was kind of something I wasn't feeling like I was doing, even though I did take out a good chunk of his team already so far. I took out 2 of his obnoxious mons in Magearna and Hippodon. But truth be told, his entire team was actually threatening, so I needed to get more stuff out, and most of his team just didn't seem to be taking enough damage for me to take it out with anything I had left on my team, so that was incredibly annoying. So yeah, I go for this Iron Head, obviously, and this guy, I think he predicted me to switch or something, but he went for the Ice Beam. I guess he had nothing to lose because he had other options anyway, honestly. He's just gonna bring in the Latias now, or I think I phased him into Latias, actually. Yeah, I think I did phase him into Latias. And here he's just gonna roost, which is annoying because basically this means that now I did nothing. I get him into the Weavile now, but this was kind of like for naught, honestly. The only thing I get out of this is really just additional damage from the Rocky Helmet because, you know, knockoff and whatnot is physical and whatnot. So now I have to bring in the Metagross, and I do get to finish off the Weavile at least. Now here, unfortunately, if I got a crit with this Bullet Punch, I would have been able to take out this Mine Shout, but unfortunately I wasn't able to, so yeah. And I think from there, I might have actually been able to win this match, actually. Assuming the Latias wasn't scarfed or anything like that. And if it was, then maybe I would have been able to send in Zeraora. It was going to be pretty close, I think, honestly. I'm not really sure, honestly, but what does matter here is that ultimately I do end up losing because obviously this Mine Shout just high jump kicks the entirety of my team and just pretty much wins, obviously. But yeah, that's gonna be the whole match. Yeah, this match was one of the more difficult matches, I'll admit. Like I said, it was kind of a rough matchup. If you look at if you actually saw the you know, the teams earlier, I'll show them here again if you want. But yeah, if you look at the teams, it is slightly rough. I feel like the matchup favors my opponent a little bit, but it was definitely doable. At least I thought so anyway. That I felt like I could have probably beaten this guy had I made a few correct plays here and there. But in this situation, yeah, nah, it's because my opponent was just playing way too damn well. In fact, I'd argue that I probably could have considered it somewhat miraculous that I even got to take out a few of his mons, honestly. But no, I thought he was definitely doable, honestly. It's just that, you know, I was getting kind of like impatient towards the end too, honestly. So I kind of just didn't really think a lot of my plays through, honestly. So it is what it is, honestly, though. Now, yeah, also, by the way, let it be known that this was actually a match I was not going to showcase originally as well. Because when I was starting to showcase these matches for the G7ML League, I was only going to actually only showcase the ones that happened in-game, basically. But not only would that be not fair to my opponents, honestly, the ones that played me in the showdown matches, but also I decided to just showcase all the matches, even the ones that take place on Showdown, just out of respect to Aves, who was I think was the commissioner for this league, who had quite the courtesy to actually invite me to his league, honestly, because, you know, it's not every day for me that I get invited to a Pokemon Draft League, honestly. But yeah, so I was like, you know what, let's just showcase these matches as well. I'm not too crazy about Showdown. In fact, for me, Showdown is just, you know, bland. I think you already know my opinions on Showdown, obviously, so I don't think I need to repeat myself, hopefully. But yeah, but ultimately I decided to just showcase it anyways. This match wasn't that bad either, honestly. I just lost 3-0, honestly. And it could have been much closer if not me actually even winning this match, if maybe I just got a little bit lucky, but you know, luck doesn't really work for me that much all the time, you know. Although in Gen 7 I think I did have some lucky moments actually, a lot more than in Generation 8, honestly. But yeah, so that's gonna be the whole match for this week, obviously. Thank you for watching if you saw it, and stay tuned for, I believe, week 7 whenever we get to it, obviously. For now, just take it easy and have yourselves a good one.